kids all love stories. They love movies. They love to be read to. And then somewhere as they get older, that doesn't translate into reading books.
There are other things I like to do more than reading.
I hate reading.
Like, why would you read? You could watch something on TV. Like, if it's not something I really want to read, I'm not going to read it.
I'm only going to read a book because it interests me.
I'm not going to read it at all if I don't have to.
Reading was just like, I don't know, something that I just didn't do.
I hated my English class.
Writing and grammar have been the worst.
I remember being very intimidated by reading.
It was boring.
The headlines are not wrong. When they get to high school, many students arrive with low skills and negative attitudes towards reading and writing. With so much of their early schooling focused on test prep, students' exposure to the enjoyment of literature is often limited. As educators, we face a huge challenge trying to reconnect our students with print and texts. This video explores a number of ways to create an inquiry-based culture of literacy. In place of a hand-me-down curriculum, we will see examples of teacher-designed courses built around provocative questions and intriguing themes. When creating these courses, teachers consider their own areas of expertise, as well as students' interests and skills. Through their work with students, teachers have identified basic strategies that promote a culture of literacy. Creating opportunities for choice, fostering analysis, encouraging student voice, requiring revision, and setting high expectations. Though these strategies are listed one by one, in practice they overlap, with strands of each appearing in units and courses across the disciplines.
We got to pick what we wanted to take. We got to take classes that really interested us.
Students need to have some choice.
You can pick your classes, you can explore your interests.
When I look at my schedule, it's me, it's the stuff I'm interested in. Like if I pick a class, I'm picking it because I want to learn more about that subject or more about the things that they're going to talk about.
My first semester I took Toni Morrison.
Autobiography workship.
From Red Savage to Disney's Pocahontas.
It's all about love.
In the Ghetto.
Brothers K.
That's Brothers Karamazov. I had novels.
Playwriting.
Shorts.
And right now in Sisters of Caliban, we're reading it like about people in the Caribbean.
I'd never taken a class that was focused on like a theme.
When I took The Gods Must Be Crazy with Karen and reading, about mythology, I really got into that.
We do a lot of like comparison reading and stuff, and I think that's really good because, at least for me, for some reason it really made me pay attention to sort of the writer's writing style.
I've taken about 4 Shakespeare classes here, and I remember Shakespeare used to be like the scariest thing to me. I'd be like, I'm not gonna even touch that.
I still wasn't really into books, I guess, until I started taking a couple of social studies classes, like philosophy classes.
Lions, Tigers, and Bears was about like the connection between like humans and animals and that totally interested me and was totally amazing for me.
My favorite class was Indefatigable Volubility. Come up with a word every class.
Confabulation is
Immerse? What's immerse?
spelled together.
Unanimous.
Nebulous, okay. I know what that is.
All right, my word of the day is exculpate. I got it from Court TV. The alibi witness was able to exculpate the defendant from receiving an unlawful sentence.
Can you inculpate?
Oh, to make the opposite of exculpate? That's clever.
I took that class 2.5 years ago, and I still remember so many of the words.
I remember Korsky.
Arachibutterophobia.
Onomatopoeia.
Intravenous. Lascivious.
Synagogue. Esoteric.
I think words are the key to life.
Choice extends from choosing the words you're going to research to the books you're going to read.
As much as I hated reading, there were certain things that I liked.
My old school didn't let you read the books that you want to read, and they didn't give you time. They didn't take time out to say, okay, if you want to take a class that's strictly for reading, you can.
Welcome to novels class. The first rule of novels is you choose what you want to read.
They let you read the books that interest you, like from Zane to Shakespeare. They won't say, oh, I don't want you reading that because it's in a certain category. I don't want you reading that because it's about violence.
Even now, they have all those urban ghetto novels. Everybody's reading those. They know that and they find that interesting. That might be not literature. I mean, it's not really literature, I guess, because, but at least you're reading something.
One book I do want to recommend is House of the Scorpion. That's my favorite book. I really like that. That's a fun book. I read that book, and that book is really good. And I don't like reading. I hate reading, but I like that book. You get to choose your own books. If you don't like that book, then you could talk to the teacher and say, hey, could I choose a new book?
How you make that decision becomes the topic of discussion. Question.
What does a presentation contain?
There's two. The first presentation you make, you bring a passage that you want to share with us that strike you as either very interesting, different, the most boring thing you ever read in your life. You can't believe a person wrote this. Because the thing you think is the most boring thing could be very exciting to somebody else at the table. There may be somebody sitting at the table with us right now who has not read a book cover to cover in a really long time.
I don't know. Books? And I was like, I hadn't read a book. She found me a book, she got me going on it, and then it took me 2 months to read the whole book. It was 400 pages. I'd never read something that big. Rule of the Bone. I was like, this book is amazing. And I think about it now, and I think about how I still think that book's amazing, and the things that kid did, I'd love to do. And once I finished that book, I zoomed through 5 others.
Yeah, well, the book I read was Spider Town. The characters in the book were really real. When I came here, we read the exact same book I'd already read, and I was kind of annoyed. I know what it's about. Why do I have to read it again? And then after reading it again in these classes with the discussions that went along with it, it was like reading a whole entire new book.
I knew how to read when I came here, and the technical bit was mastered, but the analyzation wasn't.
I mean, I read, but what I read, I didn't really fully grasp what the reading was.
Initially, when students begin reading, they're very, very literal, and it's mostly summary. So how can we get those students to begin to develop a comfort around analysis? I have for you to read a 2-page story by a very famous American writer named Raymond Carver. When you're done with the story, I have a very short worksheet for you to fill out.
I've never really looked at a short story before that class. Now, yeah, definitely, I'd pick up a short story. I can analyze it because I've done it before. We analyzed a number of stories, not even all Edgar Allan Poe.
I want us now to divide up into groups. You're going to be arguing with each other, and you will maybe be changing sides, or maybe recruiting people over to your side.
He thought the only way to get the baby from her was literally with force, grab it from her.
If you look at the definition of a scuffle, it says a rough, confused struggle or fight. That right there just tell you that it had to be rough. It wasn't just no little yank.
If you're seeing this as men versus...
In most high schools, there's a very formulaic approach to teaching literature. You have your teacher in the front of the classroom, writing down on the chalkboard and the aim or the focus. So that's her aim and her focus. When meanwhile, perhaps someone in the classroom has a completely different interpretation, as legitimate, just different.
So the group that thinks this baby must have died for this story to make sense, how did you arrive at this baby died?
First they mention it in line 43 that the baby was red-faced and screaming. Then they continue after another 5 lines and say the baby was screaming. Why didn't they continue in another 5 lines again?
That's what makes you think that the baby started from 960. From 960. If he hasn't said anything since 954.
No, but listen, you don't keep on going.
Wait. Obviously both sides are right. This is open to interpretation. How can you assume he's dead?
It's a short story. Every single thing that happens in the story has a meaning to it. So here they're talking about this game dark or whatever, so it's I feel like some evil or something bad.
I was able to pick up on many, many more themes than I would have before because just the way language is used, it can mean something more than just the plot.
I heard things I was saying in class. We'd be making a point and I would stop right after the thing. I'm like, I can't believe I just said that. I didn't even know, where'd that come from? I don't know where it came out of me.
Students need a lot of practice learning how to analyze. Different kinds of texts provide a variety of entry points for teaching analysis.
You can take a very few number of words and communicate very big ideas.
Many questions can arise from just reading a children's book and analyzing it. And that sounds really simple. And it's not actually. Like it's analyzation. It's analyzing a form of literature.
Once all the elephants in the world were black or white, they loved all creatures, but they hated each other. One day, the black elephants decided to kill all the white elephants, and the white ones decided to kill the black. A battle began. It went on and on until all the elephants were dead.
I try to pick books that are very provocative, that have a lot of interesting ideas, that might be very controversial.
They were great.
I didn't really get the moral or the meaning of the story.
Okay, let's
Who is it by?
This is by David McKee. Okay, good question. What's this all about, right?
Well, at first I read it and I was like, well, I guess it's probably about racism because of black and white elephants, but I didn't get the message. It's like, well, don't be racist because in the end we're all going to be gray or something.
The message that I got from it was no matter what, people will always hate each other.
Bad things happen to people that hate each other, and good things happen to people that are peaceful with each other. I don't know.
I agree with Jacob. I think no matter what, there is always something that you can hate somebody for. You can always, find something to start a fight over. Now, I didn't really realize that until you guys said it. So, I don't think.
See, here's the thing about children's books. This is something that this guy thought about. Every single page.
They really get into these stories in a very analytic way. And I think it's good practice, really, for reading literature, reading novels, where you ask yourself, well, what are the characters really trying to communicate?
Whether you're reading a children's book or like a very complicated, sophisticated adult book, you're doing the same thing.
It's really the skill of close reading or careful reading. To get to the ideas requires work.
The court ruled that since Bakke had established that the university had discriminated.
I was able to take a law class and understand constitutional law and read briefs that lawyers have trouble with and come to understand them like as if I was a lawyer.
If petition or purpose.
In law, you have to be able to say, where that law came from, and so it's a lot of reading. I felt like I was gonna die.
What did the UC Davis Medical School do? What are the facts?
They had a special program to vet minorities to disadvantaged.
And at 100 slots, 16 for the special program. Right, with more qualified.
You have to grapple with a case. It requires careful unpacking of text. It's something that builds literacy skills.
Read a couple of paragraphs and then talk amongst yourselves as to sort of where this is going. Okay? So read.
Constitutional law is every case relates to our society and their lives somehow. And they know it. They really know it.
Your Honor, we believe that death deserves rational scrutiny. One of our 4 reasons is to desegregate our school. Second, so we can have more minority students in
It kind of links more to you than just reading out of a textbook. You're reading about Plessy versus Ferguson, you're reading about cases like that, but when you're actually acting this out and you're in that room and you're arguing for it, you understand it more.
All we're trying to do with our special literacy program is remedy, we're trying to bring up the minorities. We have to solve the past because it affects us now.
I am one of those students where sometimes I feel so strongly about something. And I'll walk out the classroom and still be arguing with the person
Michael, if you allow the Harvard plan to be in effect, you know what you're allowing the people from Davis to do? You're gonna make them do everything in a more covered up way. That's exactly what's happening. You don't know what these people at Harvard are saying.
These people are really talking about the books that they just read 5 minutes ago on their 10-minute break when they could be talking about some other BS.
How can you take the side of the Harvard plan?
How can you take the side of Davis?
You know what they could be doing? They could be letting in 50 black people and only 2 white people. You don't even know if they're doing that.
You don't know.
And that's unconstitutional.
Some students have never really been invited to really say what they think about a text. It's like, what? You really want to hear what I think? Yes, I do, and something more.
Teens want to express themselves in any sort of way, whether it be lashing out or drawing or talking. That's probably the most important thing you can let a teenager do, is express themselves. This is their only chance to kind of have a voice.
So often, like, the frustration of literature classes for kids says, well, here's your paper. You know, you want them to say, here's my paper.
You should copy down all the information that you're going to need to put in the back of your anthology.
It's like a way to read so you can actually get stuff out of what you're reading. And I really learned that when I was in the anthology with Phyllis. We were reading different stories, and we had to pick a theme or a topic that we wanted to use, and we had to pick different like short stories and stuff basically to form our own anthology.
At first, my mother didn't know what an anthology was. And then she was like, why does your book have other people's names in it? I'm like, that's what an anthology is, a collection of other people's work.
I mean, your job is to decide how much goes in, how it balances out. Remember the introduction we read by Mary Helen Washington? What was she getting at in her introduction? How Black women perceive themselves. Yeah, other people had written about Black women, but she wanted a collection where Black women speak for themselves. You have to think about that. What's your point of view?
Well, my anthology is females and self-image.
What I would like to do is stories where you have kind of a revelation. It's kind of like going through a hard time and you get through it.
So are you talking about more like survival stories, like The Hatchet, or like more everyday things?
I'm not sure exactly, maybe some people had ideas for me.
Why don't we ask Alexi questions that might help him to focus? When you develop an anthology, you have some kind of mission. There's a reason that you're doing it. So you're talking all in the past now, right? And that reason becomes clear to them as they keep reading on their topic. Then they can finalize their selection and work on an introduction. And then that introduction explains and gives voice to their mission.
It's really a way to read different things and then really to get your mind thinking of a connection to really read between the lines.
In my introduction, I wrote a little piece. I think for guys, it's a good thing to read so you really recognize what role you play.
What was your biggest gain from doing this?
I'm much more aware of the things that affect females. And I think they have, in some ways, I think they have a harder time than guys do when it comes to certain things. So, check it out.
How many pieces are there? How many different articles are there?
I think I got like 20 something. I'm not really sure because last night I got more than 20, I know that. But, I worked really hard on it.
How many did you start with?
How many did I start with?
Yeah.
0.
In school, like, you do a lot of things because you're told to do them, and then you have those moments when you do something like, wow, like it was great. Like, some people, things that have moments that change their life.
That's a hot thing to start with. I'm pretty sure.
That was one of those moments for me.
It just kind of made me feel more eager about learning and just more that I had a voice.
I learned how to speak my mind, how to be confident and independent.
I'm going to ask you to do a little more writing.
The way that I voice my opinion is writing. When I first started, my writing was all over the place, and now, I've seen, growth over time.
I want you to just finish this sentence. In order to understand me, you have to know about.
I like working with kids on autobiographical writing because they're always ready to start writing. They have all the ideas and the stories already, so we can really focus on their voice.
Let's turn to Girl Interrupted.
If they made it seem like she was going to the doctor, she was being admitted in the hospital because she was tired. But they gotta be more to me. It made you want to read more.
In addition to the published autobiographies that we read, their stories also become texts in the course.
They all were saying, "Don't hit him. It's not worth it. Don't do it. Don't do it." I ran up to him as fast as I could. I even jumped over a table. I punched him so hard I could feel his jaw crack.
I was reading this book for another class. And I was reading the book, and I was not so much focused on the content, but on the writing. And I know that had a lot to do from autobiography workshop, because that's something that I was looking at myself when I was writing.
My mother was determined to teach me how to divide. I would have to go back home after lunch and sit with my mother doing what seemed like hundreds of division problems.
But I was confused on a lot of parts. I felt like you jumped to a lot of like subjects a lot, and I didn't know exactly what you was talking about.
I was having problems with the transitions, like going from one subject to another. Like it seems like I'm just saying it. We give feedback on what we think should be changed, what we think should be added, which is the complicated part, because like you were not thinking about writing about that particular thing, and then you realize that is necessary for people to know really what's going on.
Everybody knows that the first thing that you do is not the best thing that you do for the most part. With some direction, you could go back in and tighten up those ideas and make it better and look for grammar and look for examples to clarify your ideas.
Everything I wrote was challenged, and that never ever happened before, where everything I wrote was challenged and had to be fleshed out more and fleshed out more.
Over and over and over and over and over, and just like, okay, look, this way, no, not this way, this way.
I was always trying to like cut corners and see what I could get away with not doing, and he just looks at me and just like, Bobby, look at that. Like, come on. Look what you're doing. Look what you're cutting out.
Go. I'm clenching my fists, the uncontrollable shake. With one smile missing, your life is at stake. I'm now half, no longer whole. Chaos has fallen. I've lost all control.
The last poem that we workshopped, one thing that we talked about is if you don't understand something, feel comfortable asking the author, what do you mean by that? I don't think that's an attack at all. I think it helps the person work through what they're trying to say.
In the last 2 lines, or the last 4 lines, how does the person just turn into a she?
I would get a lot of edits, like, why did you put this word? Like, I'm not so sure about it, and it kind of would be sort of like bother me a little bit, because it's like going to someone's painting and adding a different color, That's how I look at it.
Are you reading it as a negative ending?
There's always a couple of students that feel like their first draft is their best draft because their first draft is their most natural work as an artist. I try to get kids to understand that actually you can work on something and it doesn't make it any less creative or any less yours.
Will he, the little soldier, be next? The little soldier doesn't know his name anymore, just a code name, Captain Zero.
You have an idea of something you want to come across to your reader. So when you're having a discussion about what your poem means and kids are coming up with these interpretations that were not your original intent, I think it's interesting that you recognize that the meaning that they're coming up with actually works, or you really see they're not reading the text carefully enough.
I don't have a problem with the full, it's not part of the sentence.
So you understood it as part of the same question?
Yeah, I got confused before because I read it from the full all the way to the anything.
So it's more like you want help understanding the break between the again.
It helped me see that sometimes I might write stuff that's a little too deep, and my metaphors might be too much and people might not understand it, so it's always good to lighten it up.
Often, by the end of the semester, they see that a kid's feedback helps them and then they really like their next draft better. That's the best argument for why this is something you should do, is when they read their first draft and then they read their second draft and they like their second draft better.
I think what most improved is probably my writing, because like my social studies papers, I look at them now and it's nothing I could have ever done before.
It wasn't always that organized, and it wasn't always as compact as it should have been, and it was kind of all over the place, and it was always like in proper English. It's a little easier now that I write, because I'm writing a lot now.
This term, biographies, is going to focus on the 20th century.
The social studies course, Biographies, grew out of another research course where we looked at the American West. The books that they were digging the most deeply into were biographies. They would become enamored with this historical figure and become more interested in doing more and more research.
It's a class that can open your eyes to new things and new people, because there's a lot of people in the class that people did, and I had no clue who that was, what they did, or whatever.
Your second book is going to be due right before the spring vacation.
I don't only want you to jot down factual information that comes up, but I also want you to jot down things that stick out to you, that maybe like perplex you, because those are the types of issues that will probably develop into some kind of thesis.
What I do on a weekly basis is collect all of their notes, and then we're looking at their notes together to see what they need to improve on.
So presentations begin approximately May 1st. You getting nervous already?
I think of the presentation as being the kind of kickoff to the whole
writing process, and it becomes almost like a verbal outline.
The person I did my project on was Emma Goldman. She was an anarchist. Anybody know what an anarchist is? It's a person that doesn't agree with the laws or government because they think the laws they make oppressive for people. So my research question is, did Emma Goldman's personality help or hurt her political life? The book I read, it came down to the point that she didn't really accomplish anything because she was too independent.
So you're going to argue in your paper then that her personality really hurt her political career. How could being outspoken and demanding help your political career?
I think that by being outspoken and by being demanding, you can gain respect from people.
I remember there was this one thing that Dano said that really helped me a lot. It was that for her as a woman to like be so bold, in a time period like that, that was something that I didn't see. It was one of the main things I argued in my paper.
I feel like the first draft is them getting everything out on paper. Maybe there's a few sections that are missing that they're still struggling with a little bit. By the second draft, they're getting more done and I'm giving them more comments. And then they're wrapping it up by the third, but in some cases it's several more.
My writing history isn't so good. I guess because I was so interested in her, I was interested in writing a paper. And I guess everybody was shocked that I wrote such a good paper after doing so much revisions. So it was a pretty good paper.
What's the longest paper you've ever written? A few pages? 3? 5? 4? My experience has been for these types of papers, it's like roughly 10 pages, I would say.
They want you to write almost like college papers. And so when I first came here, I wrote a paper, it was maybe like 2 pages. It was like, okay, this is not acceptable. And I guess towards sophomore, junior, I started writing maybe like 6-page papers.
They just always wanted more from me, and they just always kept pushing me. And I got a little frustrated sometimes, so I just didn't want to do anymore. But like they kept pushing me, and until it was just like better than I could think it could ever be.
Novels was boring at first because like I'm so used to reading like these little books like 15 pages. Like certain things in some of the books, like I wouldn't understand like the phrase of it, like what was they talking about?
The kids don't come in with the skill and confidence to do these difficult readings.
Sometimes I'll read something, like I said, and just like not know what I'm reading.
If you say to them, we're going to read a very difficult court case or read a chunk of Aristotle, they're excited by that possibility, but they're also intimidated. And they are right to be intimidated. It could be very difficult reading.
And I remember sitting down and going, oh my God, I have no idea what this is at all. I read it, and I didn't have any understanding of it. And then the next day in class, Rachel was like, okay, for those of you who read, let's go over this, let's try and understand it.
Gail was like, just read what you could read, and then what you don't understand, ask. And like, I would always ask.
You might be sort of slowing the class down and picking one passage to really look at. You might be letting them argue the issues a lot longer to get their excitement up.
What do you think it means in that context?
To be inhumane?
Yeah, or to wed yourself to inhumanity.
Maybe not to abide by the things that they say men are inhuman.
Okay. And why is the speech occurring here in the play? That's your next problem to solve. All right?
You might be meeting with kids separately to get them going. So we're having to devise, many different strategies to sort of move a class from the point where people are just feeling that they can't crack a reading open to the point where kids can sort of feel like they can go through a passage and say, let's argue about this point or that point.
I had taken a class called Russian Lit, and there we had read Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I can never pronounce his first name.
That was the hardest thing I've ever had to read. Like, I've never had to go back and read pages over and over again so many times.
At home, I did the best of my ability, and I just did by myself, and then came to school and was like, I didn't know what this was saying. And I put it out on the table for the class. I was like, you know what? I don't know what this is saying. And more often than not, somebody else was like, me either.
I don't know what anybody got from this. I didn't really get anything. What page? 4. Like, it's definitely, the narrator.
Read.
Incidentally, he was remarkably good looking, tall and average, slender and trim, with beautiful dark eyes and dark blonde hair. Like, without that sentence, you know, the paragraph would still read smoothly, and the narrator chose to put that in for some reason.
He was walking around and he was saying how, you know, the smells of, you know, the city and how people that don't have any money are used to those smells, and he's used to it. And I feel like he thinks he's one of them, but yet doesn't think he's one of them.
Diagnose for me, please, Mr. Marmalado.
He's pathetic.
Why do you say he's pathetic?
He talks about how he totally respects his wife and she's such a dignified, educated person, and yet he goes and drinks all their money.
His wife, he allowed his wife to persuade his daughter into being a prostitute. What? That's not even her child. I don't think he deserves sympathy.
If I didn't have the class discussions, I would not have been able to read that on my own. And I got to the end, and I felt like I had climbed Mount Everest.
I see people who like just don't do stuff because it's like they're not telling me to do it, so I'm not gonna do it. They do the bare minimum, and it's really easy to do the bare minimum when nobody's saying do more.
Like, I was really scared of the social studies because it felt really advanced. The first couple days of class, I'm really freaking out because Harry's describing this book that we're going to spend the whole semester reading, a biography of Robert Moses. Like, this book falls down in front of me. It's like 3 inches, 4 inches high, like 2 pounds or something like that. And I'm staring at it like, I can't read that. And then, to my surprise, I end up not only reading it, but actually comprehending everything that it's saying and actually, you know, analyzing this thing.
I guess now I feel easier to read. Like, I could just read anything, and if I don't understand, I can easily find out what it means. But before
I would just read it just to read it. But now I think more about what the author's trying to say, like reading between the lines and everything.
I used to just kind of skip over and just read really quickly. I've kind of just slowed down and I kind of absorbed the book more, and I kind of like to even find people who have read the book to kind of discuss it.
I sort of like got inspired by other kids in the school to like read, and like I was like, damn, I really want to be able to say something smart, or to like for other kids to look at me like I'm intelligent.
Too often, when thinking about literacy, teachers focus on short-term goals. The next test, the next book, the next marking period. But what kind of culture does that create? Creating an inquiry-based culture of literacy requires a focus on the long term, providing an environment that makes reading engaging, encouraging students to grapple with complexity, creating opportunities for student expression, challenging students to refine their ideas, and expecting students to go beyond what they thought possible.
I could read Shakespeare by myself. I'm proud of that. You know, it was very hard for me before.
I'm not intimidated by books anymore.
I was reading books like The Painted Bird and The Odyssey and, you know, all these other books that I would have never have read.
100 Years of Solitude. That is a big book full of knowledge and all sorts of themes and things like that. I don't think I would have been able to read that.
Because I read so much now, I think it's helped my mind spread out for as more as I think about new ideas and venturing out.
I'm just gonna try to read all the time, like just always have a book in my book bag. If I don't get to touch it that day, okay, but as long as it's near, I'm gonna touch it sometime.
It feels good when you actually find a book that make you say, wow, that was great to read. And you can only find that book if you just keep picking up books and picking up more books and just reading them.